What's up YouTube? My name is Caden and you're watching Gasset Garage. Today is part 4 of the 1000cc engine swap on this off-road go-kart. In today's video, we're gonna get this beast of an engine finally running once I finish the nightmare of wiring on this thing. So this thing will run in this episode, I promise. So stay tuned and enjoy. Okay guys, so in the last video of this project, we got quite a bit done. We hooked up all of the tubing on the radiator, and then I also mounted this switch panel right here, as well as the key switch. But I still have to finish wiring this thing up, which I will probably do off camera, mainly because it's taking me absolutely forever to figure out how all of this works, especially because I don't have the rest of the wiring harness that plugs into that. So I'm gonna have to pin a lot of it together. And also I need my phone to look at the picture of the wiring diagram. So I'm gonna finish doing that off camera and then I'll come back after I did that. But we've also got the fuel pump and whole fuel system, the fuel tank done on this thing. I got the coils mounted. I got the battery mounted and hooked up. I had to actually flip the throttle bodies around because it was all backwards on this thing for some reason. And then we also finished up a lot of the extra pieces of the wiring. And then I also put on the third axle bearing as well as the main drive sprocket on this thing. So we got a lot done in the last video. So in this video, we're going to actually get this thing running. Like I mentioned in the intro, which I'm super excited about, but there's still quite a few things that I need to get done before that can happen. Like I need to build an exhaust for this thing with the pipes that are sitting over there, which is going to be interesting because they're stainless steel and I've never welded stainless before, especially with a flux core mild steel MIG welder. So that's going to be interesting. And then I've also got to finish up all this starter wiring, which is really giving me a headache because it's just so utterly complicated on this thing and taking absolutely forever. So like I said, I'm going to come back and start filming again once I have the starter button and kill switch all wired up on this thing. So I'll see you in just a second. All right, guys. So I've been working on this for a couple more hours now, and I still haven't got the kill switch or starter button to work properly. And this is what I'm dealing with. I just have this absolute pile of spaghetti here, and it's absolutely driving me insane. I did get the gear position sensor hooked up, and I found that it actually does have a performance upgrade on here. This is a smart timing retarder eliminator, and it says race use only. So that's pretty cool. I'm going to keep looking at this off camera and try and get it hooked up so we can actually get this engine to at least spin over with the starter button right there. But in the meantime, right now, because I want to get something else done, I did get some chain in. So let's go ahead and put the chain on this thing and also hook up the throttle cable. right, guys, so I just got the chain on, and then I also got the throttle cable hooked up down in there. It's a little janky, and I'll probably have to replace it later because it's probably going to break the way I have it hooked up, but I'll deal with that when that happens. And then I've also got the ignition switch mounted right here. So what I've kind of come to on this wiring is I can't really figure this out on my own because I have a wiring diagram printed out right here, and this is actually the right one this time because apparently I had the wrong one before, and there were some things that I had to redo on this thing, but for some reason it's still not working. So I know someone who is a motorcycle mechanic, and he knows a lot more about this than I do. So sometime this coming week, I'm going to take this thing over to him, and he's going to help me figure out this ignition and starter wiring. But in the meantime, while I'm waiting to set that up, I'm going to go ahead and build a second jack shaft mount back here because, as you can see, the holes are kind of large and the chain is super loose. So I'm going to build a chain tensioner that's going to go somewhere in here, and then I'm also going to make another mount with a bar that's going to come from the base, go up, bolt into those two holes, and then come up probably to this bar right here. And then I'm also going to add another bar to the roll cage. And then after that, we can probably get started on building an exhaust for this thing. All right, so I've got the chain tensioner done right here, and it works pretty well. The chain tension does change a little bit when I flex the suspension, but it's not super bad. It does get a little bit tight, but I think its max tightness is when the shocks bottom out. And we've driven this thing before with the old engine that was on it, and we never bottom these things out. So I think we should be good to go there. And then I've also got this piece right here that's reinforcing the jack shaft. So now when you grab the chain, there's almost no play in the jack shaft, which is good. And then I've also got this other roll bar welded in. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the two pieces of the exhaust, and we're going to start building an exhaust on this thing. It's going to be a little bit interesting because this is stainless steel, and the only thing that I have is mild steel flux core wire in my welder, which I looked it up, and you can weld stainless steel with mild steel wire, but it will just cause the welds to rust. But I can always just throw some header paint on it, so I don't really care about that too much. I just want to get it together. And from what I read, it should hold together pretty well. So let's go ahead and get started on the exhaust. All right, guys, so as I've said before, this wiring is driving me absolutely insane, but I did just take this thing to my friend's place, and he is a motorcycle mechanic, and he said that everything was wired up correctly, but he was kind of stumped on why this thing still wasn't working, considering the fact that everything was wired up correctly. So what he told me to do was go buy a OEM-style kill/starter switch that would normally go on the handlebar of the motorcycle, which I did, and I wired it up and it still wasn't working. So I started messing around with it and I came to the key switch and I found out that it's mislabeled. This is supposed to be the run position and that's supposed to be the off position, but it turns out that what's labeled as the park position is actually the real run position. So when I put this key on and turn it, this little relay back here turns on. Like that. So it turns out all along it was just cheap Chinese parts just being cheap Chinese parts. So it was literally just a mislabeled key switch and I just put it in that position. So now when I turn this thing on, when I hit the clutch, it spins over. So that is a huge success. It may not seem like much of an accomplishment, but trust me, this thing has been driving me absolutely insane. And we still do not have spark, which is really unfortunate. I was kind of hoping this thing had spark. But now that it is spinning over finally, I can go over this thing a little bit more off camera and figure out why we do not have spark. But I will turn the camera back on once we have that. But for the time being, I actually want to build a heat shield right here. And I have that piece of plate steel over there that I'm gonna put up right here to kind of protect the driver from the heat of the engine because it's literally right next to your elbow and you don't want to burn yourself on it. So let's go ahead and get that heat shield built. All right, so the heat shield is done and it looks pretty good and it doesn't sound like it's gonna rattle too much, which is nice. So another thing I noticed that needs to be done is this shift linkage down here. I used too thin of a rod for it and it's very, very bent. So I'm gonna replace it with a thicker piece of rebar. It's kind of a cheap, tacky way to do it, but it's just a shifting linkage. It's not like, it doesn't have to be that fancy. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove this and cut a piece of rebar and weld the washer and the bolt on the end of it and replace this. All right, guys, so it's a few days later and I just got the new fuel pump in from Amazon. I think this actually goes up to like 90 PSI, but I do have a fuel pressure regulator, which is right here, which regulates it at about 43 to 44 PSI, and I have the return line going back to the tank. The reason I'm replacing it is because this one only puts out about 4 or 5 PSI, and it's actually for carbureted engines. So that is not gonna work. So let's go ahead and get this thing replaced. All right, guys, so I've been doing a little bit of research on this wiring, and I've come to the conclusion that the cam sensor and the crankshaft position sensor are both good, because I was trying to figure out why this thing didn't have spark, and those are usually the likely causes of that, but they're both fine. So I did a little bit more research, and what I've found is that these Chinese aftermarket kill switches, or key switches, do not have the 100 ohm resistor that is part of the anti-theft system that would normally be in the OEM key switch. So since this one doesn't have it, it's preventing the engine from running. It's preventing it from having spark. So instead of buying a whole new key switch and trying to find an original one, I'm basically just gonna still use this one, but what I'm gonna do is I'm going to solder in a 100 ohm resistor into the wiring inside of this, and hopefully that will give us spark. All right, guys, so the 100 ohm resistors just got here. I had to order a pack of 20 because that's the least amount that I could order, but it was only like $4. So let's go ahead and take one of these and take the back of this key switch apart and get it soldered in. Still no spark. All right, I'm really starting to not trust this key switch. So what I did was I took the wires going into it and I essentially just hot wired it. And this right here is where I spliced the 100 ohm resistor into. And I actually used a piece of rubber fuel line to reinforce it right here and covered it in electrical tape to make sure it doesn't break. So I've got the main power wires right here. I've got those all spliced together, and then the resistor right there, and I got it plugged into the wiring harness. And I heard the relay click on when I plugged it in, so it is working. And now let's see if this thing has spark. Yes, we have spark, finally. Let's go. I just heard something click. Wonder if it... We finally have spark. All right, let's hook the spark plug cables back up and put some fuel in this thing and see if she'll fire up. All right, guys, I've got everything hooked up. Let's see if this engine will give us a first start. I just put some gas in the tank, so let's turn the fuel on, turn everything on, and see if this thing will fire up for us. so I was looking at this fuel system a little bit more, and I'm not really sure what's wrong with it. I may have to take this thing apart and see if the injectors are firing when I spin it over. And I still have yet to test and see if this fuel pressure regulator is actually working. But for right now, I want to hear this thing fire off, so I'm going to spray some brake clean down in the intakes and see what happens. Well, we got it to fire. That means we still have spark. Let me turn the fuel back on and see what happens. We may have something up with the fuel injection system. I'm going to look at this a little bit more off camera. And I'm going to run some tests and see if the injectors are firing, and then I'll kind of go from there. All right, so I've been doing a whole bunch more testing on this thing, and I found out that the fuel injectors themselves are good, but the problem was that I wasn't getting enough power through these two connectors right here that go to the fuel injectors, so they weren't firing. I was getting a signal from the green wire on there that comes from the ECU, but I wasn't getting 12 volt power through the yellow and orange wire right there. And I couldn't really figure out why. I thought it was the relay, so I swapped a new one on there, but it wasn't the issue. And I came to the conclusion that the problem was actually the strength of this battery right here. Even though it is new, this engine is so big that it takes a lot of power to crank it. And during cranking, I put a multimeter on it, and it actually goes down to about 10.5 or 10.6 volts, which is not enough to send 12 volts to the fuel injectors while it's cranking. So it wasn't able to get enough of a pulse on the injectors to start this thing up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my jump pack, hook it up to the battery so we have plenty of extra power on there. And when I did that before with a Noid light, that I plugged in, the Noid light was flashing when I had this thing jumped off with extra power. So we're going to go ahead and do that and try and start this thing up after I put the airbox back on and everything. All right, guys, so I've got everything hooked back up, and I've also put in this battery on-off switch, mainly just because I bypassed the key switch. I don't want to leave this thing plugged in and have it drain the battery, so that's why I installed that. But I think it's finally time to try and give this thing an actual test start, now that everything should be working. Fingers crossed. So turn that on, turn on fuel, and then like I said, we're gonna need this right here. Now, if this thing does start, I'm not gonna run it for too long, mainly just because I don't have any coolant in it. This on, all right. That thing sounds terrible, but here we go. It's trying. Yeah! Oh, come on. Yes! All right, I got it up a little bit, and there's a lot of smoke. But we finally got it running. Let's go.
It was spitting fire.
Well, I think that's just because the mufflers are really cheap, and it was spitting out some of the muffler packing. But It finally runs. Let's go. Sounds mean too. This thing sounds so good.
My ears hurt.
Yeah, I got my brother standing right here. This is his go-kart, so he's been paying for a lot of this, but yeah, it finally runs. It doesn't run great, and I do have to idle it up a little bit, but I think the ECU should kind of learn how to get this thing to run good. And I think also once it warms up, it'll run a little bit better, but man, this thing sounds mean.
Let's go!
Yeah, we're both pretty excited. I think that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. And I'll see you next time where we should hopefully be putting some brakes on this thing and taking this thing for its first test drive. So stay tuned for that. And again, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. I did notice I may have to put some Loctite or something on the little bolt that's in there because I already tightened up this baffle and it came loose, probably from all the extreme vibrations. But this thing sounds absolutely mean, but it really, really stinks in here.